Welcome into another edition of New Track Record Podcast from the WELT studios. Caleb Hatch and Justin Kinney with you. We'll recap the thrilling BitNile.com Grand Prix of Portland.
Do you really mean that?
No, okay. I'm being sarcastic. From over the weekend, also give you a preview of what's to come. The Hy-Vee Milwaukee 250s coming up this weekend, Labor Day weekend. A lot going on in IndyCar as the season winds down. Just 3 races left. But first, hi, Justin.
Hello, Caleb. How are you?
Doing well. We're getting to, it's like the weird time of year. We're late August, going into September. Not gonna lie, it's where I get torn because college football is almost here.
Oh, it is.
IndyCar still going on.
Well, you and I are in agreement, and I know so many people out there. Oh, the season needs to go longer. We are perfectly happy with.
No, we're not in agreement.
We're not. You wish it went longer.
No, I want the season to go to early October.
Really? I don't.
Yeah,
I want it done because I don't have like take this weekend for instance. I don't have the time to watch as many college football games as possible over Labor Day weekend and watch not one but 2 races this weekend. I hardly ever watch races live. You know me. It took me till Tuesday to finish Portland, and now I don't know when I'm going to fit in the 2 Milwaukee races.
So as we record here on Thursday morning, August 29th here in the U.S., we'll do our recap of Portland first. First off, before we get into our 3 things, which I feel like it's going to be pulling teeth just to come up with takeaways for this race. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it was just kind of there. And isn't that kind of just Portland in general on the schedule? It's just
normally
there.
We get chaos on the first lap.
True.
In the first turn.
Yeah, in turn 1, which we didn't. It just took a couple more turns for something to happen. But it just feels like I like Portland. Don't get me wrong. They all can't be bangers, right? That's the answer. They all can't be bangers. And I just feel like Portland just never really is that exciting other than turn 1, lap 1. But Will Power gets the dub. I'm sure he's perfectly content with the race that we had on Sunday. Yeah,
win number 44 of his career. And more importantly, a win that closes the gap in the championship down to 54 points. So he moves up to 2nd in the standings. Colton Herta drops to 3rd. So you look at the numbers. I mean, yes, technically, are there several drivers still with a shot? Yes, but unless Alex Palou is just going to have a horrendous weekend at Milwaukee. I mean, you treat it like double points because it's 2 races.
Correct.
So you could have some big swings, but it's going to take Palou crashing out of 1 race to really reset the title fight.
And maybe even, not only does Alex Palou have to have a bad finish, but his challengers, of which there are just 2, in my opinion.
I would agree.
Have to have a really good race. I don't think Colton Herta is capable of doing enough to get back in this race. Maybe Will Power, but Will Power wins Portland. That's fine, but he's got 2 wins in the last 4, but he's bookended 4 races with wins. The other 2 he finished 12th and 18th. That's not going to get it done. So I don't see anybody catching Alex Palou. Will Power 54 points behind. I think I don't see it. I think it's wishful thinking. I don't see it happening.
I don't either. And unless Alex Palou is going to crash out of a race or have an engine failure, something crazy like a mechanical.
I feel like he has to have 2 20th or worse finishes over the final 3 races to give anybody else a chance.
See, I would say he needs 1.
Well, I think it needs 1 to maybe make it close, but you have to look at Will Power and Colton Herta then have to perform. And I think I still think even if this is a close championship going into Nashville, Alex Palou will deliver. So I could see it. I could see Alex Palou this weekend having a rough race, maybe not of his own fault, being taken out or something like that, to make it close. My thing is, even if it's close, I'm taking Alex Palou to win the championship. The dude knows how to close.
Yes, that is true. And this would be 3 in 4 years, which is wild. Just a level of dominance. Now, having ovals coming up, and Palou's never won an oval, but I read his average finishing position is like 3.6 this year when you exclude Iowa 1. So it's not like he's been bad on the ovals. He's finished 2nd in the Indy 500 before. So let's not pretend like he's a bad oval driver. He just hasn't won on an oval.
Correct.
So it's a very different thing.
That's
Just
a
like
very different thing,
I don't
yes.
think someone's going to say, "Oh, Colton Herta is bad on ovals." Yeah, he's
Correct.
not one of the best in the series, but he's not bad either because he's not one on an oval either. But he has an oval pole.
This isn't like Sebastian Bourdais, being completely uncomfortable on ovals early in his career and just not racing well on ovals. I mean, this is not that kind of situation.
Correct. All right, so let's get to our three things. And I think the first takeaway I had for Portland was that we all expected chaos in turn one, and it happened to be just a few turns later with Scott Dixon, and it goes back to race control. Kyle Kirkwood probably should have got a penalty, especially if Pietro Fittipaldi got a penalty for the contact. I just consistently inconsistent. That's what we always say, and that's what race control is. I don't understand.
Yeah, and
I'm not even that upset. I don't get it. I'm confused.
And we're going to talk about it later too, with following up on Joseph Newgarden's actions and stuff. And again, I'm going to point to race control as maybe the main culprit of that issue. Once again, it was Kiffin Simpson or Kyle Kirkwood that initially forced Scott Dixon off, and then when him trying to then get back into the groove, and then Pietro Fittipaldi had the run and vaulted over the rumble strips. There we go. I was going to say gravel strips.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the word as well.
And then collided with Scott Dixon. Even Scott Dixon said it when they talked to him was, Fittipaldi really had nowhere to go, and he said it started much earlier than that. So even he was pointing the finger at more Kirkwood than Fittipaldi. So inconsistent again. I think it's they look at it and say, okay, driver A crashed into driver B, so driver A is to blame. Well, what happened before that to put driver A in a position that he was there? I guess maybe that's too much thinking for race control.
Well, did you see what Dixon told IndyCar Radio after the incident?
I did not.
He said it would be fun to get back out and wreck the 27.
I can appreciate that. I like a good emotional Scott Dixon for sure, but he was just unfortunately wrong place, wrong time, and it really didn't start with Fittipaldi contact. It started with the Kirkwood contact. But race control. Here we are.
It just nothing makes sense to me.
I think we should just make it a rule that race control is going to be a constant at some point in our three things every single race.
Pretty much.
Because it seems like that's the direction it's going.
What's your first takeaway?
Well, let's talk about the winner and Will Power, and a guy that had the emotions that we saw at Gateway the week before. And he's a dude that came in, and even the day after, or the couple days after Gateway, was hanging out with Joseph Newgarden, was interviewed pre-race on Sunday. He said, yeah, Pat, we talked about it. We were on the lake and on the water having fun. It was, once again, proof that while we can still see vintage Will Power at times, he is not a guy that's going to take adversity or anger into the next race. He was a guy that came in and was comfortable and was relaxed and put together 110 laps of really, really good racing for him. And I think it was further testament to a dude that has matured over the years. We still get signs of old school Will Power that we love, but he's a guy that was able to move past it within a day or two at most, came into Portland and pretty much blitzed the field. Started second, took the lead, turn two?
Yeah, it was very
not
early.
Turn one, and was gone from there. Alex Palou closed a couple times, but you never felt like Will Power, unless he put a wheel wrong, was going to lose this race. And it was just a very good bounce back performance from one of the best drivers that we've seen in this era.
Oh, no doubt. My number two, let's talk about Santino Ferrucci. It was a huge weekend for the Foyt squad. Ferrucci got into the Fast Six, the first Foyt Fast Six appearance since 2021 St. Pete, which was Sebastian Bourdais, per Nathan Brown of the Indy Star. Also, his first career pole. Now, it didn't really mean anything in the race. He got past early, kind of faded back, and I'm sure between strategy and pit stops and everything, it didn't seem like his car had the speed really to keep up front.
Right.
But for an 8th place finish, another top 10, I believe that is tied with Ayrton Dari's 2002 Foyt season. It might be ahead.
Is that where we're at? for Ferrucci?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Eight top tens.
So it's been a massive performance. He has a legit shot to finish in the top 10. And the first pole position, which the last pole for Foyt was Sato in 2014 at Belle Isle. So it's been a while. And also, this that Tony DeZeno pointed out, this is wild to me. Santino Ferrucci has a pole this year before Will Power. Will Power still doesn't have a pole this season, which is unbelievable. He's the greatest qualifier in history, and Ferrucci went out and beat him. Unfortunately, qualifying was exceptional to watch as a fan, and then the race was a done.
The race not so much. And it was cool to see Will Power congratulate Santino Ferrucci on his pole and was kidding him about running his setup, because we've learned they're very much teammates with this technical partnership. It's not just, hey, we're going to send you some data and you're on your own. They're very much in meetings together and all that stuff. So it was pretty cool for Will Power to go over there and congratulate Santino Ferrucci. And Ferrucci said that out of all the drivers in the paddock, he's probably closest with Will. And so that was pretty cool to see those two. I should have known. I sent you this. I should have known this was going to happen because I'm watching Florida State, Georgia Tech on Saturday prior to qualifying. And the defensive coordinator for Georgia Tech's last name is Santucci. I should have taken that as a sign that it was going to be a big weekend for Santino Ferrucci, a.k.a. Santucci. But I didn't connect the dots. But no, it was cool to see Ferrucci up there. Cool to see Foyt, P1, faded in the race, like you said. We're in the top 5 for the majority of the race. It's just, those pit, and that's maybe the next step for Foyt is getting quicker on pit stops because he was consistently losing 2 seconds per pit stop. I mean, you had guys with Penske and Ganassi doing 6, 7 second pit stops, and Foyt's doing 8 to 9 second pit stops. And that means a ton, especially in a race where after the initial caution, we didn't have any more cautions. And I think that hurt Ferrucci. If we would have had a couple more yellows and he could have pitted under yellow, probably could have had a top 5 finish. But they did all they could. A great performance for the weekend. And I think it further shows, Caleb, for me, the ineffectiveness of Santino Ferrucci's teammate. I like Stingray Rob. I think he's a nice guy, a good guy. But what did he start? He started 24th.
Finished 18th.
And his teammate is on pole. There shouldn't be that much difference between teammates. And we've said it before now with David Malukas coming in for Foyt. And more we're learning that it's probably Ferrucci back if the money's right. That's going to be a tremendous boost to Santino Ferrucci to have a better teammate. All due respect to Stingray Rob, but if we're talking so much about the gains of Foyt for good reason, both of the cars should be consistently in the top 15 or so, and that's just not the case.
Now, to close out the season with ovals, where Stingray Rob has actually showed himself pretty solid compared to road and street course racing this year, maybe there's a chance for a little bit more balance to close out the season. The other thing I want to point out with Ferrucci winning the pole, I mean, this is a guy known as like an oval specialist, right? And he wins it on a road course. It's really tough. He beats out Will Power to do it. I think it just adds to how impressive this feat was, not only for him, but for the team as well.
And he was a guy that said at Gateway how excited he was going to Portland. He felt like the team could have some success there. But we mentioned Santino Ferrucci, 8 top 10 finishes. Stingray Rob has 1. That can't be that big of a discrepancy between 2 cars of the same team.
Well, and I think the next evolution of the team, if the lineup truly is Ferrucci and Malukas, we'll see that gap close considerably, and it will be kind of a question of who's the top driver there.
Right.
Because we simply don't know.
And maybe it's a back and forth thing. I mean, at this point, if that is the lineup right now, if you had to say these two guys that are in the cars next year, do you see how likely is it both of them finish in the top 15 in points next year?
If it's Ferrucci and Malukas, very likely.
I think so too. It comes down to how they set up the team. Are they upgrading even more in the off season? I mean, look, there's going to be 2 teams of Ganassi staff available, and perhaps more because their IMSA program's going away. So correct.
there's a lot of talent that will flood the market in terms of crew guys and mechanics and engineers and strategists and all these positions behind the scenes that do matter in terms of success on a race weekend.
Right.
So there's going to be talent, and Prima's going to pay big money to lure people away. Other teams are going to pay big money. So Foyt's got to be competitive in that aspect, and they've done that the previous couple off seasons of being more competitive and building behind the scenes talent, and we're seeing that pay off what Ferrucci did last year at Indy and now this year across a full season. And I forget who had the article. I want to say, was it Nathan Brown talking about how because Michael Cannon came in so late last year, that they just focused on Indy, and then because of contract clauses and non-competes and all that, and then focus this year on the full season, and that's showed in the results. So maybe the next step is, again, working on pit stop practice. That's always the thing that, like, Penske is the best at pit stops, and no one's going to get on their level, but you want to be close, and that's what you need to do.
You absolutely need to, and who knows with the arrangement that we have with Penske and Foyt, with Malukas effectively being a Penske driver, signed driver, ready for Foyt, how much personnel could also be loaned over there? Because Penske wants to see David Malukas in particular thrive. And so could it involve maybe some personnel going over to Foyt next year in a loaner situation? So,
which they've done with engineers.
Correct. So it's, for me, another great weekend for Foyt, for one of its drivers. And I think for the more success that we see Santino Ferrucci have, really shows that Stingray Robb isn't delivering at the level that he should. And again, it's not a personal attack or anything on him. It's just he's not performing. And when you have one driver doing ABC and the other guy's not, and they're running similar equipment and similar support, it's tough to rationalize holding on to that second driver.
Who's up next? I don't think even remember. Me. It's you? Okay.
I think it's me.
You're number 2?
I am a number 2. And
crazy.
Gosh, what do we have here? Well, let's talk Romain Grosjean. How about this?
What a segue.
Was running very well. Romain Grosjean, top 5 most of the day, started 6th. And then it was a spin of his own, right? He just cut the corner a little bit, went over the rumble strips and
spun going into 1.
And then just decided to pull out in front of, was it initially Christian Rasmussen?
Correct.
And then did it a second time. Like, it was just, it was vintage Romain Grosjean. Not safe, obviously. Could have been much, much worse. Does he do it, let's say, if Will Power's coming around the corner and pulls out in front of Power? Just a very unsafe situation by Romain Grosjean, but also on par with Romain Grosjean, if that makes sense.
I love that the penalty in the box score, penalty summary, for car 77, unsafe behavior.
Yes.
And it even cites Rule 9.3.1.1. Like, I just think it's so funny that they literally called it unsafe behavior. That's the rule. And it was just stupid. I mean, it was just a, like, what are you thinking kind of moment.
Well, it's the frustration
in front of an active track and not looking around your surroundings.
Well, I think he knew exactly what he was. I think it's just Romain Grosjean having red in his eyes, seeing a top finish evaporate on a mistake that he made, and then just saying, screw it, I'm just pulling out in front of everybody, or not even caring. And I think it was just a lapse in judgment, of which we've seen plenty from Romain Grosjean, and what could have been just a 4 or 5 position loss all of a sudden turns into a 27th place finish because of the drive-through. And that can't happen. And it's these types of things that prevent me from saying 100% that Romain Grosjean's back in the seat.
Well, and funny you say that. Motorsport had an article that we missed last week, and apparently Grosjean's being contacted by other teams, but he wants to stay at Juncos. That's kind of the update there. But he was, at one point recently, what was he, 14th, 15th in the standings? He's dropped to 17th. He's got to finish strong, and there are 3 ovals where he's hit or miss. He can have a good top 10 result, or he could crash out. We just don't know what to expect.
You just don't know. I mean, he had if 3 of his 4 top 10s this season are on road and street courses. So his only top 10 at an oval is Iowa 2. So we'll see if Romain Grosjean can finish strong, because a couple more, I mean, he could finish as low as 18th, I think, in the standings based on where we're at, which if you're Juncos is disappointing considering you've been in the top 15 for the majority of the year. But yeah, Grosjean being Grosjean for sure. Could have been a heck of a lot worse. That's for sure. What's your number 3?
My number 3, the disappearing act that was McLaren over the weekend.
Yeah, that was crazy, wasn't it? And even Pato O'Ward had some interesting things to say, which was enlightening.
Very strong comments that he said after the fact. But Pato O'Ward, who had a lot of speed, thought he was a fast 6 car, struggled in qualifying, didn't advance out of his group, qualified 22nd, finished 15th. Alexander Rossi, same deal. You expected they could contend for the fast 6. He qualified 17th, finished 12th. Nolan Siegel, never a factor. Started 23rd, finished 21st. He got lapped pretty early on in this race. I mean, it's shocking because they rolled off the truck fast, and normally that's a good sign for the rest of the weekend. But Pato basically said they struggled, I think, adapting to the alternate tires and the tire wear. But
right.
It's really bizarre that a top caliber team could have this kind of disappearing act. I mean, you compare it to, I mean, obviously Penske won the race and Ganassi was second. Colton Herta led Andretti in 4th, all 3 of their cars in the top 10. Even Graham Rahal had a good result, finishing in 9th, dealing with an engine penalty after a good qualifying there. Just the disappearing act. It's stunning for an entire team to go through that, and I'll be curious to see if next year is a step up or a step down with the changes in the driver lineup, and we think having consistency across a full season
right.
in the driver lineup.
If that happens.
If that does indeed happen. But, I mean, they got 3 races. Look, Chevy's better on the ovals. That's what's played out this year. Pato O'Ward should have a legitimate shot to win at Milwaukee and Nashville. Alexander Rossi should have a legit shot for top 5 finishes there. Even Nolan Siegel could impress and finish in the top 10. So it's just shocking that they completely disappeared in this race and were never a factor except when they were getting lapped.
Yeah, and Pato O'Ward said it in qualifying and practice. They couldn't get the alternates to come in, and then in the race they couldn't get the primaries to come in. So he said it's very confusing, really frustrating. But I also think it's enlightening. I'm glad we're getting our asses kicked, and he points fingers at everybody, even himself, in terms of making mistakes. But I think he makes a good point in that sometimes we just need to take what the car is giving us. And I think maybe McLaren is feast or famine.
Yes,
sometimes
compared to other teams. Yes,
yes. As some, I think O'Ward and I don't know the exact quote was basically saying sometimes we just need to. I feel like McLaren, if they show up and they feel like, okay, we're a top 10, top 5 car, that the team principal or Gavin Ward isn't satisfied with that. It's like, okay, we need to make changes to get the win. And they're not making the changes to get wins. They're making changes then to go to as a top 15, top 20 car. I know it's F1 thinking, but does McLaren need to start thinking and say, hey, we're racing these teams. We need to make sure we're up with those teams or we're beating those teams, not necessarily going for wins. I don't know how to approach it. I mean, conversely, what's the impact, if any, of McLaren now being, right now, the best team in Formula One in terms of pace, and the impact it's having, if any, on IndyCar?
I mean, Pato O'Ward's last 3 races, so you have Toronto where he spins on his own after a restart, and we all know the chaos that happened after that. Gateway, I'm trying to remember, did he have like a hybrid issue?
Yes.
Okay, so he had a hybrid issue, or no, he had an engine failure. Ericsson had a hybrid issue.
That's right.
McLaughlin had no hybrid during the race. Find that interesting. And then we saw what happened at Portland where they just simply had no speed. I mean, he was a legit championship contender coming out of Iowa, and then it's all gone wrong. And I think he's done a better job as a driver in terms of being more consistent throughout the season. but we're looking at kind of mechanical stuff and just a pace issue that this is completely slipped away.
This is a quote from Pato O'Ward from the story on Racer.com. He says, "The reality is maybe in the years past we weren't at as big of a deficit. I just feel like the deficit seems to be bigger and bigger. Here's the big thing. We keep raising our bar, but sometimes we need to bring it back down to scoring points instead of always going big for wins. A top 5 almost feels like a win sometimes." And I think maybe that's what you need to take. Maybe Gavin Ward needs to take that to heart. And, maybe Gavin Ward feels the pressure looking across the pond and seeing McLaren challenge for the Constructors' Championship and an outside chance at winning the Drivers' Championship in Formula One, and says, man, McLaren on the F1 side has gotten their crap together. We need to get our crap together over here. I'm not saying Zach Brown is particularly putting immense pressure on Gavin Ward, but does he feel that pressure?
I don't see how he could not feel the pressure. I mean, Pato O'Ward, remember last year, it's like he finished second, I don't know how many times, was it like 5 times?
4 or 5, yeah.
2 wins this year. He was in the championship fight until what happened at Toronto, which granted that was his own fault, but the last couple of races have not been. And the maturity we're seeing from him with that statement saying, hey, take the top 5 when it's there. It can't be so boom or bust, and that's what the team feels like.
And that's kind of how Pato O'Ward drove his first couple years. Was a boom or bust, right? How many we talked about Pato O'Ward? Hey, just take what the car is giving you. I think he's matured in that respect, but I think he needs to be surrounded by guys that buy into that as well.
And the problem was what the car had was a 15th place finish, and that's what he gave it.
That's what you do. Last 3 races finishes 17th, 26th, and 15th for Pato O'Ward. You mentioned the blown engine at Gateway as the issue there. But still, after a run of 1st, 2nd, 6th, starting in Mid-Ohio, it's been 17th, 26th, and 15th. McLaren going the wrong direction, and as of right now, not having a single driver in the top 5 in standings and just one in the top 8, that is not good enough for McLaren.
No, certainly not. And what's your number 3?
Well, let's talk about Colton Herta. And
okay. Are you going to issue your apology? Well, I wasn't going to bring it up. I wanted you to bring it up naturally.
Well, I was more going to talk about him restarting the engine when he was supposedly not supposed to, but
that's not his fault.
No, I agree. Good performance by Colton Herta, starting 8th, driving to 4th. Yes, this past weekend was a very good weekend for Colton Herta. And the last 4 races have been really good for Colton Herta. 5th, 1st, 5th, 4th. Has finished outside of 6th place just once in the last 8 races. That was 11th at Iowa. He's really driven himself back into a conversation for the championship. He's not going to win it, but it has been a really good run for Colton Herta. Colton, I apologize.
There we go. I wasn't gonna bring it up on my end because he's regained his 2020 form. Yes, they need to win more races in order to win a championship. And he's had 3 pole positions this year, his first on an oval. We're seeing some growth and progress, and I think this is the driver we expect to see season in, season out. The other thing is he's one of 2 drivers with 4 straight top 5 finishes. The other is Alex Palou. That's really good company to be in.
Very much so. The only blemish, not blaming him, was the pit penalty. We mentioned this before, that it is supposed to be disabled in the pits. And then the teams were kind of vocal in saying, quit playing around with it, just leave it active. Okay, IndyCar did that. And then they have a driver use it to restart the car in the pits. My thing is, what's the big deal?
I think this rule will change next season.
I would hope so.
I really do. I think it's, as Marshall Pruitt alluded to, and I think it was in the story itself, basically you test things out, make sure people understand how stuff works, and then I think this rule will change next year. Herta said he didn't even know it was a rule, which, I
kind of doubt that.
I want to believe drivers, but we've seen this happen in other areas.
It's like Joseph Newgarden saying he didn't know the rule.
Yeah,
okay, sure.
It's like, come on.
Yeah, you knew the rule, but I also don't blame. Look, if your car dies and inside the car you have a
it was
way
quick
to
thinking.
Yeah, you have a way to restart it. I'm pushing that button too. I don't blame Colton Herta in the least. I thought the penalty was weird, where he just has to give up 1 position to a lapped car, and it's like, well, and Marshall Pruitt pointed this out. What stopping people from doing that all the time if they only have to back up one position as opposed to losing multiple positions if you have to get a restart from the back. So to me, it's just another weird rule that IndyCar. The biggest thing is IndyCar has all these rules that they can't enforce, and this is just another one, right? Why is this a rule if you can't enforce it in terms of not allowing drivers to use it? Just keep it active and let people use it. I don't understand. I would think, because they said safety, I think it's less safe to have more people over the wall, which you would have to do if you have to restart cars. Isn't it more safe to have an ability for the drivers to start the cars in the cockpit so they have less guys over the wall?
And it was bizarre in the sense that the car was running, and then he's getting ready to peel out of the box, and then it just completely shut off.
Yeah,
it was very weird.
I don't know if it was a complete stall or something else happened, but the technology worked. It was cool to see that in a split second. He had restarted the car and taken off.
Now, would you agree the penalty wasn't stiff enough?
Yeah, the penalty was dumb.
I mean, 5 seconds and letting the car that was ahead, that was a lap car, whatever.
Which we said, too, is if that's the rule, people are going to do that all the time. But
Correct.
I think that is a loophole that's going to be closed in the off season. I understand it in terms of trying to figure out what's the safest, but in my opinion, the safest thing on pit road is the least amount of guys over the wall, the better. So if a driver can restart the car in the cockpit, you'd let it happen.
All right, a couple other random tidbits from Portland. This from Chad 200. This is wild to me. So on June 23rd, Alex Palou won the IndyCar race at Laguna Seca, and Max Verstappen won the F1 race at Barcelona. Neither has won a race since. Championship races that once appeared all but over now look very interesting. I still feel like the IndyCar one is over. F1, there's a chance. I guess they both feel like, yeah, there's an outside opportunity, but it doesn't seem very realistic.
No, I mean, you really need Max to have a couple engine failures over the final, 8 races for Lando to have a chance. The problem is you can keep beating Max, but if he's finishing second and third, you're not closing the gap very, very much. So, but the Constructors' Championship, I would be surprised
Different story.
if McLaren doesn't win it. But yeah, interesting stat for sure.
And then one other interesting tidbit, this from Christopher DeHard. It said, interesting here on the Speed Street podcast with Connor Daly. And apparently there was a fuel shortage this past weekend at the IndyCar race in Portland. Excuse me? What?
They didn't have enough gasoline for the cars?
I guess.
Can we get some context in that?
Yeah.
No other details?
Yeah. What?
That's it?
What does that really mean? I don't know. Very bizarre.
Well, the Pacific Northwest is just this out of the way, wilderness. It's very tough to get resources.
I mean, they bring
apparently.
Fuel trucks. Like, it's not.
They
have their own race fuel. Like, how is this even an issue?
I have no idea what's going on. Just only an IndyCar, right? Only an IndyCar.
I guess. We will get to the mailbag. Also, we will get to rate the race, news and notes, some driver changes, updates on international racing. 2 different stories. We talked about Mexico City last week. We have an update for that this week if you missed it. And on another potential track that I find very fascinating.
Oh.
So we'll get to that a bit later on in this episode. Also do a preview of the Hy-Vee Milwaukee Mile 250s coming up this weekend in West Allis, Wisconsin at State Fair Park. Doubleheader. So we'll get to all that. But first, if you agree or disagree with us, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can find us on the web, newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, sign up for the email list. It is free. You'll get emails for new episodes, any special announcements as well. So free to sign up for that. Also, you can check out the store. We have t-shirts and stickers on there for you. On social media, you can follow us on Twitter /X, IndyCar Podcast. On Instagram, same handle, IndyCar Podcast. Facebook, just search for New Track Record. And you can send your questions, comments, concerns, rants, what have you, via email as well, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. So email us if you have kind of a longer question. Feel free to send us an email. You can support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. And as always, download and listen for free on your favorite podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, YouTube Music, Overcast, Castbox, Player FM, wherever you find your podcasts.
LimeWire, Napster.
Yes. I don't know if you
think there are people listening. They're like, "What? What are those?"
Yes, I'm sure
Yeah.
there are people listening who don't know what those are.
Oh, well.
Very sure. Okay,
those are the
so
days.
mailbag time, and we start with rate the race. So how would you rate this race?
5.5.
Okay.
What I have?
Yeah, I'll go 6. Our average for the fans in terms of rate the race for Portland, 5.4 repeating. To be specific.
5.4.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so about 5.5 where I had it.
Yes.
It was Portland seems long. And I know the track isn't big. I mean, 110 laps.
Like the race seems long?
The race seems long.
I feel the
because-
opposite.
No, I felt well, maybe it was just a long green and the lack of action, but I was just like, I was looking at it, it's lap 40, it's lap 50, it's lap 60. I'm like, holy crap, this is 110 laps? Like, can something happen? So it was probably just more the pace of the race and the lack of yellows in particular that didn't break it up, but I just felt like it was a long, monotonous race. And
I mean,
not a lot
if we
happened.
didn't have Toby Sowery and Kyle Kirkwood
Right.
side by side, that was probably the only intriguing thing that happened after lap 1.
And Sowery made some really good moves, but when they're hyping it up and he's running 24th, I was kind of like, man, we're really reaching, aren't we?
Yeah.
On this broadcast, showing us side by sides between two guys that are racing for 22nd position.
Yeah, no, it was not ideal. And
We had a through the field on lap 40, which was not a good sign. Not even halfway through the race, we had a truth through the field. So, yeah, 5.5 for me. You had it as a 6?
yeah, and I'm just 6 is the number I had going in. I could go lower pretty easily. I could not go
Could
higher.
not go higher. So you're being very, very friendly with your 6 ranking.
Yes, there just wasn't really a whole lot there for me, and I feel like we've seen some good racing in the past. I don't know.
Some
I kind
excitement.
of I was chatting back and forth with IndyCar Deep Throat the other day, and it was kind of like we've had 3 good races all season: the Indy 500, Barber, and Gateway. The rest are very forgettable.
Yes.
And we have a car that's 12 years old. We have a series where there's constant hand-wringing, I guess is the word I would use, over Penske owning it and Penske having a team and just all that comes with that. And we'll get to more on that a bit later. The hybrid has it's fine, but it's just kind of there. It's made the cars heavier and the racing potentially worse.
Well, it's not there for the racing, as we know. It's there for the manufacturers.
Yes.
So I've kind of gotten to the point with the hybrids is it's not for us.
I'm glad they instituted the hybrid. I
Yes.
hate they had to do it mid-season.
Correct.
And the fact that we've had so many failures, I mean, already. I mean, again, they had to do it because of the manufacturers, because IndyCar had to hold up their end of the bargain, and they were borderline not doing that. So I just hope next year that they find some things, whether it's tires, whether it's reducing more weight off the car. We're not going to see as fast as speeds at Indy next year because of the hybrid. So
Right.
I don't know. It feels stale at the moment.
It does, but we've also in the past said
But literally a week ago, we were talking about a great Gateway race. It was a
Which-
surprise that everyone said it was
yeah.
going to be awful, the drivers included. It
would've
ended up
thunk?
being great. So am I overreacting to one race? Or,
no, because you're talking about the entirety of the season. How we only
yeah.
have 3 races that were any good.
I mean, would you agree that there were only 3 races that were any
In terms
good?
of memorable races, yes,
I mean, St. Pete was memorable after the fact.
for the wrong reasons.
Yes. Long Beach had moments. I mean, Iowa 1 and 2 were abysmal.
Right.
So that's nothing to write home about. Detroit was notable for just all the chaos, which is fun every now and then. But
Well,
I mean,
and we haven't had a race.
Toronto was a dud.
We haven't had a race won outside of the top 4 teams, and we're usually good for at least one a year in that respect.
Well, that's the other aspect. Like keeping things the same just increases the dominance.
Which is where we're at. I will go to bat against anybody that tries to tell me that it's a highly competitive field from 1 to 27, because it's not, because only 4 teams win races. And this year, nobody else has won a race. Occasionally we mix in a Ray Hall win a race, right? Ray Hall with Lundgaard, or somebody wins a race. Nobody else is winning races in this series. other than the top four teams. And that's where we're at.
I guess the competitive nature of it all, the IndyCar touts, just feels a bit deceiving with what we've seen on track this year.
Exactly. Well, and it's the last couple of years I kind of push back on people that say it's the most competitive form of motorsports. Like, it's
going
not.
Back last year probably too, but
Cup has surpassed IndyCar in terms of competitiveness. I mean, Harrison Burton won a freaking race last week. Yeah, it's at Daytona where anything can happen, but Harrison Burton winning Daytona, which you also watched and said Lee Diffie did a tremendous job on that broadcast. That's unpredictability. Okay, you may not like it, and we have plenty of issues with Cup, but one of the issues I don't have is the diversity of winners, and it has more than IndyCar. And I know people will say, well, they have this many teams and this many races. I don't care. The fact of the matter is there's more teams and more drivers that win races in Cup than there are in his IndyCar. And now all of a sudden with a Constructors' Championship that's actually interesting heading into the fall in Formula One, man, you even have that to point to.
And Pato Ward said the racing is taking a big step down since the introduction of hybrid unit. Look, I'm for the hybrid unit.
But it was down before that, I thought.
Yes.
We didn't have a lot of bangers in the first half of the year before hybrid.
True.
But I think it goes back to your point. It's an old chassis. They're basically finagling things in there, whether it's the new hybrid, whether it's the aero screen, all that stuff. They're just finding ways to bolt and fit pieces onto an old chassis. And I don't know if having a new chassis helps the racing, but at least it gets the possibility of it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you stick with the same chassis for so long, you've maxed out basically what it can do, and we're talking microseconds instead of tenths.
Correct.
In terms of, development. So I don't know. That's just kind of my thought, and I get it. We just came off Gateway, which was great and way better than expected. So I don't want it to sound like I'm overreacting because of one bad race. I'm talking the course of a whole season. It's just kind of where my thoughts are. The product feels kind of stale. Maybe we'll see something different because they're going to Milwaukee and Nashville. I haven't been to Milwaukee since, 2015. And then Nashville, they haven't been since, 2008, 2009?
It's been a minute for both of them, for sure.
So maybe that's the change. I had posted this. So they had 14 in-car cameras. Dixon, not one of them, for Portland. And I said, something that we hope eventually comes with the Fox TV deal will be in-car cameras in all cars at every race.
Which they used to have, wasn't it? Or have they never
No, I don't think they've ever had it. But it's something that needs to happen. Lynn_IndyCar said, you think the championship leader would have a camera in their car? Yeah, correction. I think Palou also. Yeah, Dixon had one. Sorry, Palou did not. So that's where that comes from. P56 Front said, you mean not just on the cars of the team sponsors paying for it? Yeah, that's the thing, because it costs, was it like $250,000? I think Mike Shanks said in a video with Marshall Pruitt a while back. But how important that is for sponsor exposure to have those,
right?
And how they've basically put 1 million stickers, on the aero screen kind of roll hoop thing, because that adds value to sponsors, obviously. Daguerre said the TV production could use an overhaul, new graphics, cameras, etc. Overhead cameras of the pit stops F1 style would be something. I don't know if they could do that just because of how pit road is set up in IndyCar compared to an F1. But yes, we'll get an overhaul because we're getting a new TV partner. I guess that's kind of where my line of thinking is. That would be a huge step for IndyCar in terms of exposure for teams, for everyone. It just it needs to happen.
There's going to be some new ideas that are coming with Fox. Some of them may be good ideas. Some of them may be not so good ideas. But trying new things is one of the reasons why I'm excited about Fox. Is they're going to bring a different perspective, take some things from NBC that do work, maybe look at some things that could be improved from NBC and try those. We know from Fox's history and other avenues that they're not afraid to try new things. Some of them are hits. Some of them are not. Glowing Puck when they had the NHL was not a hit.
Not a hit.
So
didn't they do the first down line though? Was that them?
They were the first one, I think, to do the first down line. So Fox is going to bring some different ideas and maybe some interesting visuals, and people may be upset about it. God forbid they have cartoon drivers, right? Which they use in the NFL and NASCAR. Like, that doesn't bother me. I don't know why people are so infatuated with that. But anyway, I think there's going to be some ideas, and some may hit, some may not. But I think we're going to have a fresh perspective with Fox, and it'll be a good thing. We know NBC is just playing out the string at this point.
Oh, yeah.
And you could maybe say that was the case for the majority of this season, is they were just kind of playing out the string.
Outside the 500, it has felt like that quite a bit.
Maybe they took for granted that they were just going to pay the same amount and re-up with IndyCar, and then Fox came out of nowhere, and NBC was like, oh, crap. And then they're like, you know what? And I don't blame NBC going, well, the ratings aren't there, so we're not going to invest in it. That's perfectly fair.
Speaking of ratings, we never saw ratings for Gateway.
It's true.
We did not see ratings for Portland.
When we
obviously won't see anything at a Peacock for Saturday. So who knows?
When we don't see them, they're not good.
Yeah, correct. NK Harden, so we talked about this. Of all the stupid takes you guys have ever had, there are a ton. The fact that you think elephant ears are better than funnel cakes is easily the worst. Be better. Agree to disagree. We talked about that, I think, last week. Moving on.
Speaking of that, no, I did pay NK Harden for YouTube TV to make sure. I was not going to pay him after that comment. Maybe I'll rescind my $18.
I had posted a poll. Will we see Logan Sargent in IndyCar next year? 55% of you said no. Basically, 45% of you said yes.
I don't think so.
I'm starting to trend towards no as well. OBX Jody said, I said no. Logan does have a very wealthy uncle, and stuff like that can open doors in the world of IndyCar. In F1, he always had a bad car, so it's tough to tell what he could actually do. However, he never came across as overly interesting, and that may work against him. Lynn _IndyCar said, I see Logan in IMSA or WEC. Yeah, that's probably pretty likely. Aaron J. Richmond, maybe after a year in Indy Lights. Kojo 617, no money brought. Well, that's not true. FitJ 1983, no, just not good enough, unfortunately. And then Driver Image said, just because you got cut by an F1 team doesn't mean you're qualified to be an IndyCar. This idea needs to stop. On the other hand, how big of a check is he bringing? Because that opens quite a few trailer doors in the modern paddock. Remember, he had a seat fitting with Foyt a couple years ago, and then he got picked up by the Williams Driver Academy and continued on the F1 ladder. The other thing is, I get the IndyCar fans say, well, we don't want F1 rejects, but you could essentially say that about a lot of people who are in IndyCar.
Well, who's the
Marcus Ericsson,
right?
Ramon Grosjean. Colton Herta was on the ladder to F1. Joseph Newgarden was before their
Marcus
career.
Ericsson
Connor
was on the
Daly.
ladder.
A lot of drivers either raced in F1 or on the path to F1. Now they're in IndyCar.
Who's the last former F1 driver that has come over and just been an absolute dumpster fire? Because it's been a while.
Yeah. Now, they've not all been, like, outstanding.
Right, but nobody's come over and embarrassed themselves.
It has been a long time. I can't think of a recent one.
Right. No, me neither. Nobody's come over and be like, that guy should not be in IndyCar. There's nobody. I mean, you could have your problems with Romain Grosjean, but you can't say he's not good enough to be in IndyCar. So that's my thing. That's my pushback from people that, we don't need F1 drivers. Who's the last F1 driver that came over and was absolutely terrible? I can't think of one.
I mean, do you go to like Enrico Bernoldi with Conquest in 2008 or 9 or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you have to go back a ways for sure.
I'm having a hard time. So Graham Rahal had these comments in a motorsport article. Joey Barnes wrote up. So IndyCar in Mexico, and we'll talk more about that a bit later on, but he said this quote, "You should ask Penske Entertainment that question about why they're not racing in Mexico." I thought that was outstanding. Hunters Way 67 said Graham is a straight shooter. Gotta love that. And Jordan _Willman said the voices continue to get louder and louder. Says a lot.
I sent you this. You can call it a conspiracy theory. I'm not saying this is true, but this just popped into my head when we were talking about Mexico City and NASCAR going there. Are they racing at Aerodromo
Hermanos Rodriguez? Yes,
that's what they're going to do. And it's just going to be a regular,
not the same exact circuit layout, but very similar.
Is it going to be a regular season race?
Yes,
regular points race. Okay, here's my thing. And again, I don't know if it's true or not, but it wouldn't surprise me. We know that Roger Penske's chummy with Donald Trump. And say what you want about Donald Trump, positive or negative. This isn't a political conversation. But we know that one of the platforms for Donald Trump is the border. and harping on the border and blaming Mexico. Is there a connection between Roger Penske having the same thoughts as Donald Trump, in the sense that Mexico is to blame for the amount of illegal immigrants coming across the border and doesn't want to do business in Mexico because of those thoughts? I don't know if it's true or not. It's an interesting potential conspiracy theory that popped into my head.
I would push back because Penske has a team in NASCAR. They're going to go race.
True, but
at Mexico City NASCAR.
I mean, they're racing in it, but they're not seeking out a race there, which is what ownership of IndyCar would.
Mark Miles said February of 22 or 23, I forget which, that IndyCar is a North American-based series. North America includes the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. So why is there not a push for this?
I mean...
Now, on the other hand, that it opened up a Richmond date because NASCAR got rid of the second Richmond date. Is that a potential for IndyCar? Who knows?
But, we're looking at it as Graham Rahal probably knows more than we do and says, ask, Penske Entertainment. Was it... And here's the detail. I don't know. The details of this is Cup financing the race in Mexico City. Is that a case where Penske Entertainment didn't want to finance the IndyCar race in Mexico City? I'm just throwing out potential reasons, potential conspiracy theories. I have no basis in anything. I'm just kind of throwing that out. It says, does he not want to do anything in Mexico because of his opinions on the border, if he does indeed align with Donald Trump like he does in other things? I don't know. Is it political? It wouldn't shock me.
It's a great point, and we're not going to get, like you said, we're not going to get political about it.
Right. I mean,
it is an interesting connection.
I'm waiting for a good excuse why IndyCar.
Oh, and Penske doesn't talk on the record like ever.
Right.
So we don't, people can't ask the question. Any
excuse. Yeah.
NASCAR has a race in Mexico for next season. Why hasn't IndyCar pursued a race in Mexico? And if you have, why haven't you landed a contract?
And explain the first question, and for Nathan Brown and Marshall Pruitt and Bruce Martin and anybody else who could track Roger Penske down. But whether he would answer it or not is another. Well, if you could even get an interview with him, whether he would answer it or not remains to be seen.
Right, that's kind of the other problem. A couple of replies. Nathan Brown, IndyStar.com, a good article that was actually posted this morning as we record, talking about frustrations from the restart at Gateway with Newgarden, that did show that Newgarden did not maintain a consistent speed, as IndyCar put it. Now, his speed varied a little bit, and there's different data. And look, someone's not telling the truth in all of this, because IndyCar said after the incident, they confirmed Newgarden maintained a consistent 80 mile per hour speed on the lap 251 restart. But someone else who sent the data to Nathan Brown found that coming out of turn 2, he was going about 87 miles per hour. And then his speed kept dipping and dipping and dipping. And he was going 82, and he's going 80, then he's going 78. I mean, I understand that he's like getting into the restart area and your speed's going to drop. But
well, if you're
I don't know, are we reading too much into this? The positive out of this is drivers talked with IndyCar about, changing procedures. They want a painted line like they have on road and street courses. IndyCar has been receptive to that. Will we see that at Milwaukee? Unclear.
Another case of IndyCar just can't get out of its own way. Do I blame Joseph Newgarden? I don't. He even said he was late on the restart. He did it on purpose. So he was probably coasting up to the restart zone and then coasting into the restart zone. And by rule, he can accelerate at any point in that restart zone. Our thing is...
But it's a digital restart zone. It's not defined on the track. And IndyCar has made this so complicated for no reason. Have the starter wave the green flag. That's what I said before, and that's what I'll continue to harp on.
Just have it. You go on green when he waves the green.
Yeah, like most other series do that. This is not that complicated.
It's so just convoluted. Why does IndyCar have to make things so difficult?
But when I read that Kyle Novak is a lawyer,
it all made sense.
It all made sense to me.
The lawyers are experts at complicating the uncomplicated, right?
And I get it in the sense of the rule book, right? You want to make sure stuff is defined and that it's airtight in terms of how the rules are presented and can be interpreted, because that's how you have teams doing stuff like, I don't know, Penske in 1994 Indy 500 when you don't have an airtight rule book. But I thought that was fascinating. The Cal Novak is a lawyer. I'm like, oh, interesting.
Here's the thing with IndyCar. I think IndyCar its head is in the right place in that it wants to give a certain amount of autonomy to the racers. They don't want to be rigid and strict and have everything under control or everything restricted for the drivers. But at the same time, you have to, because the drivers are going to find, and teams, every single loophole and run way around and reading in between the lines of rules to find an advantage. And I think same thing with the restart of the engine on pit road. IndyCar think, well, the teams will know not to do it. Well, no, teams are going to, and drivers are going to act in a way that they get an advantage in any possible way.
This is motorsports.
It's like IndyCar just needs to be much more, and this is counterintuitive of what we want off the track in terms of being more strict. IndyCar just needs to be more strict with its rulebook. It cannot leave gray area for drivers and teams to take advantage of, because that's what we continue to see. Quit giving the drivers and teams the benefit of the doubt and just lay down the law and say, this is what the rule is. Either you do it or you don't do it and you're penalized. I think we're seeing more and more of that in various reasons, whether you go Joseph Newgarden, whether you go the Colton Herta thing, even the beginning of the season with St. Petersburg, trusting teams not to go in and change code. You're giving too much of the benefit of the doubt to teams and drivers, and you just can't do that.
It's funny you're talking about, they need to kind of lay down the hammer, and the one area where you shouldn't have ambiguity is the rule book. On the other hand, in terms of openness, communication, receptive, you need that, and that's where the series kind of shuts everyone down.
That's the thing.
I think it's fascinating.
You need to flip-flop those,
correct?
Right? You need to be open to having conversations, but the rule book is the rule book. You just need to tell drivers, have you read the rule book? Okay, that's the rule. Cut and dry.
Yes, fully agree. A couple of replies. So I had posted, so wait, he didn't maintain a consistent speed, talking about Newgarden. Somebody is lying about the data here. And look, is it IndyCar? Is the anonymous, or not anonymous, but the unnamed source,
correct,
talking about the data? We get to the specifics in the article. It's a good read talking about all of this. But again, he was going nearly 87 miles per hour exiting turn 2 at Gateway. Then entering turn 3, 80.2, an additional timing line, 79.8 in turn 3. Then he said he didn't do anything on the restart. Same timing line, 77.7, 78.7, 81.1. So, look, they said he maintained a consistent 80 mile per hour speed. What does that mean? Because the speed dips because they go by RPMs. They're not looking at miles per hour on their dash.
Right, and he's coasting. You're effectively coasting. I mean, unless he has cruise control set, you're not going to be going in consistent speed. So I just think, for me, the rule book needs tightened up, and quit leaving open loopholes in the restart procedure.
Historic Hot Lap says, you can call him many things, but he's not a liar. I wonder what he thought that press conference, if he thought that press conference would fit so many situations this season. That, of course, was his press conference at Barber, post St. Pete disqualification and the win being taken away. Indy Oreo said, you didn't need telemetry, just a pair of eyes to see that Joseph Newgarden played it dirty on that restart. TJR312 said, Newgarden not being penalized? I've never. Well, I mean, he did have St. Pete after all. So
I don't
know. This, I hate that this comes back up, but it comes back up because someone had specific data. It's not a team owner or driver, just giving a quote, complaining about it. It's specific data. That's why it's coming back up. It's a great story. Read it at IndyStar.com. Subscribe, support. Nathan Brown doing great work there. That's the mailbag. Let's move on to fun stuff.
Fun stuff, eh?
So let's start with some driver changes. First off, Catherine Legg back for Milwaukee doubleheader. No surprise there. We anticipated that to be the case, that she would be back with Dale Coyne Racing in the 51 as they're battling again for leader circle spots. But a bit of a surprise, Christian Rasmussen in for the rest of the season, Ed Carpenter out.
It's a good move by Ed Carpenter.
And Ed said, look, I'm not retiring, but he admitted, I've not lived up to what I need to do in the car. And Christian had tested earlier this season, I think at Gateway, and showed well in the test. He's tested in lights at Milwaukee, I believe. So, I mean, he's shown well. He deserves the opportunity, and as Nathan Brown points out, doesn't have a top 10 in his last 15 starts, just 2 in his previous 24, 12 out of the top 20. He has struggled. And
didn't he finish the top 10 at Mid-Ohio?
Ed?
I was Rasmussen.
Yeah, sorry. I'm talking about Ed. I mean, he has struggled. And his last top 5 finish was, I think, the Indy 500 in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So he has struggled, and I think this is the right move. We'll see. I mean, they are tied with Connor Daly in the 78 for the final leader circle spot. This is going to be fascinating to watch to close out the season.
They have the tiebreaker, which is the highest finish, because they have a 9th place by Rasmussen at Mid-Ohio. But that's what all due respect to NBC, I don't need to see constant updates on the leaders, the championship race, unless it's a dramatic change. Show me the as they run standings of the leader circle, because that's what I want to see for me. So it's a good move. It's obviously done by financials, and Ed says 2 reasons: better chance, and it can be tough for a driver to admit that and say, we have a better chance at finishing in the leader circle if somebody else other than me is in the seat. That's the decision that Ed had to make. And I think he's also wants to see more of Christian Rasmussen to see where he fits in for 2025.
Yeah, as Marshall Pruitt said in this week's Racer.com mailbag, ECR wants to keep Rasmussen. So obviously they want to give him that opportunity to play out. And we know there are tons of drivers jockeying for seats. Toby Sowery, Kevin Lee mentioned that he's working on a budget for a full season for next year, and he's shown well in his limited outings in IndyCar. But no, I think this is the right move. It makes that car feel competitive. I mean, Ed just simply was not competitive at Gateway. He's not been competitive in a while. And as long as he owns the team, obviously he can do whatever he wants. But he also sees how important the leader circle is and believes that Rasmussen gives them the best shot. And having the consistency in the car week in, week out, I think that will help as well, right? We when you have a road and street course driver and then an oval driver, it's just you're back and forth, so you don't have a lot of rhythm in terms of working with the crew and the team and all that. I think this will help in that aspect.
And he showed well at Indy.
He did.
I mean, he was
highest finishing rookie.
Yeah,
12th.
12th. Yeah, I thought I was going to say 11th.
Now
or 12th.
he was making bold, crazy moves, but he finished the race. It did pay off.
So I do think it's advantageous for Rasmussen and ECR to see what he can do, because he turned some heads for the right reasons at the 500.
So those are the updates on the driver front. Now, in terms of international races, so we talk about Mexico in IndyCar, and Pato O'Ward said, look, I will help all I can, and we told you about Graham Rahal's comments. But there's another track that could be in line for IndyCar. Now, this is definitely very far out of left field and not something that feels imminent, let alone feasible at the moment. But IndyCar officials apparently, now, who does this mean? Does this mean Ricardo Juncos and a couple people are visiting Rafaela, Argentina?
Oh, really?
Yes.
Here we go.
There's a technical visit. Now, this is translated from Spanish, but they are going to take a look at the track. Obviously, you have Franco Colapinto in F1 with Williams, Argentinian driver. That's going to be fascinating. Motorsport really big in Argentina, as we know, from having Agustin Canapino in the series for a year and a half.
We need more ovals.
But, I mean, this is an oval track.
With chicanes, right? Or would they take the chicanes out? Or are we getting too far ahead of ourselves?
I think they would take the chicanes out. But here's the thing.
They have no infrastructure there, I don't think, though.
I don't think so. There might be a grandstand, but there's a lot. I mean, safer barriers for one is just the starting point. So I don't know if they would run. I think there's like an infield road course where they run the oval. It's kind of a more remote area, if I'm not mistaken.
It is a 2.873 mile oval shaped like a paperclip. It's like an enlarged Martinsville. That's the oval, at least. You can put some chicanes in there, or you can cut the track in half and have a road course through the middle. But I don't know.
I would be shocked. Now, this was a link that Indy 44 had found, and I think there's so much work to be done. Again, this is like beginning phase of just checking to see if it could even be feasible.
I think if you're going to race in Argentina, you go to, Autodromo? Hermanos? Termas del Rio.
Yeah, the one that they were looking at previously.
That's already an established racetrack. It's so volatile to even try to race in Argentina to begin with. Trying to go to a place that would need massive amount of upgrades, from safer barrier, like you said, to garages, to capacity, grandstands. I just don't see that happening. And Juncos, God love him, but don't you think he'd be out trying to find sponsors for his own team instead of still trying to find places for IndyCar? I appreciate the effort, but at this point, next time IndyCar races in Argentina, whenever that is, if Juncos doesn't start bringing in money, they're not going to be a part of it anyway.
Yeah, it's a great point.
I mean, I love the effort, A+ effort, but let's just focus on your team, man.
Other interesting stories in terms of racing. San Diego has emerged as a city where NASCAR are interested in hosting a future street race. That from Adam Stern of Sports Business Journal.
I mean, it makes sense. They can't get Long Beach, so they'll do adjacent to Long Beach and be in San Diego.
Just a few hours down the road.
Right.
Yeah, that would be obviously a huge boost for NASCAR. Also, in terms of tracks, no truck series at Milwaukee Mile next year, apparently because IndyCar took truck's date, according to Dave Kallman of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.
Now, speaking of Milwaukee, are we about to talk about Milwaukee? Should I hold this?
Hold it momentarily.
Okay.
We just have a couple other tidbits. One other thing on Milwaukee before we really dive in on stuff is that the crowd, not looking good. Adam Stern had posted this also from a Journal-Sentinel article. Mark Miles on the crowd. He said, I would say over time we wouldn't be satisfied with 15,000 people for a race, but we could be satisfied with that as a starting point. You at least need to hit 20, right? I mean, really, you should be hitting 25 to 30 in terms of attendance. And I know it's going to be a big walk-up crowd because it's weather dependent, especially on a holiday weekend.
Maybe.
That's my guess.
I don't know. I think a lot of people have plans on Labor Day.
It's tough. And next year it won't be on the holiday weekend. I think that will help.
And it's only one race.
That's
what I think is the key. Is Milwaukee should just be one race. I don't understand why we're doing two. Well, I understand why we're doing two. They need to get to 17 races.
Right.
Next year, Thermal will be a points race, so they can get rid of the second race in Milwaukee. This is the thing, though, and so many people were clamoring for Milwaukee. You better get your ass there. That's all I'm going to say. People say, well, are you going? Well, we're not the ones clamoring for Milwaukee. We're not the ones clamoring for more ovals. We'd like to see more ovals.
I would love to go. I've been to Milwaukee, I think, 2 other times. Great track. It's great food, great city, fun to visit. I can't go. I have family stuff going on, as you know.
You have a child.
That are more important.
Yes. And I
would love to go. Look, I would have gone to Nashville, too, but I can't.
Circumstances dictate otherwise.
Yes.
But I'm just saying there's a lot of people that get frustrated with IndyCar about lack of ovals. Here's a returning oval that's trying for the second time to revitalize an event, and we're already hearing murmurs about the lack of crowd.
And speaking of ovals, so Nolan Siegel's car will have the Music City GP on delivery for Milwaukee this weekend.
That is cool.
That is very cool. And then also, speaking of Nashville, Gamebridge will be the presenting sponsor for Nashville, and it's a multi-year deal. That definitely helps the promotion and feasibility for the future of that event on the oval, since it can't be on the road course. And one other note before we get to Milwaukee and then tweets of the week and random split air driver of the week. Sad news, Chuck Lynn, who's known as the paper guy at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, passed away earlier this week. He had the custom bike in later years.
Did you ever buy a paper from him?
I think I did once.
I believe I did too, yeah.
But just a staple of IMS, and very sad news to not have him around there every May.
He was an institution there, sitting outside, just outside the garage entrance usually, and Gasoline Alley. So, yeah, tough to see. Was great to see him year after year, an institution at the Indy 500 throughout the entire month, but especially race weekend.
For sure. All right, so let's get into Milwaukee. Our 3 key stats from Chad 200. Dixon was the 2009 race winner. 6.2 average finish, 190 laps led. Will Power, 2014 winner from the pole, 3 top 4 finishes, 233 laps led. Graham Rahal has finished 2nd, 3rd, and 4th with 3 different teams, 4 total top 5s. The other drivers who have run at Milwaukee, Catherine Legg, who ran in Champ Car, and then Joseph Newgarden ran as well. Obviously, that would have been, with Carpenter?
Correct.
Or CFH or whatever it was at the time. So that's it. We've had 5 drivers who have run at Milwaukee. I think that's the one thing that makes this really fascinating this weekend.
It does, and I think maybe the potential excitement with what we saw at Gateway as hopefully similar setups and can race similarly because of what we saw, and it could be an exciting couple of races at Milwaukee. Hopefully we see a lot of walk-ups. I don't even know what the weather is supposed to be in Milwaukee this weekend.
Sunny and like upper 70s, low 80s.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Get your asses to Milwaukee. But just randomly clicking through, they don't really have a heat map for how many tickets are available in each section.
Oh, I've found it.
Have you seen it? Okay, yeah. I'm just clicking regularly.
It's very hit or miss. It depends on the section.
Yes, but looks like, I mean, look at Saturday, the upper levels are pretty full.
Yeah, the upper levels are full. It's the mid and lower levels that are empty, plus there are some GA areas as well.
Yeah.
But they're only using the main grandstand.
Correct.
So that's not a good sign.
Well, where's the other grandstand? Is it
turn 1?
Turn 1, yeah. So here's my thing is everybody needs to show out this year. I would hope next year, give them one date off Labor Day. And this is the thing is running on holidays works if it's an established race for a long time.
In Mid-Ohio switched there, and
correct.
That has worked.
And it's grown and grown and grown.
In fact, I think it's gotten more popular by switching to that weekend.
I would
agree.
I don't know in Wisconsin, and it's the last vestiges of summer, and you have a lot of lakes up in that area. It's like, I don't know if people are wanting to go to Milwaukee and change their Labor Day plans, unless it's been a thing for 10, 12, 15 years. And
that's the challenge. Do you do a Sunday night race on Labor Day weekend? Is that like the idea? Now, Milwaukee doesn't have lights. You'd have to bring them in. And that's really been done pricey in the past, but true. I don't think that's going to happen. Not with Fox. I don't think that's part of their TV schedule plans. But I
mean, unless it's an FS1 race under the lights, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But I think for IndyCar and for IndyCar fans, it's important to get out there this weekend for both races if you can, one at least. But I think especially next year, year 2, when you have one race and you can put all your eggs in one basket, you need 20,000 at least next year. But if you can deliver a couple really exciting races this weekend, or even one really exciting race, it would then boost your prospects, I think, for next year.
Taking a look at the weekend schedule, all times Eastern, practice 3:35 to 6 Eastern, Peacock, IndyCar Live, Sirius XM, IndyCar Radio, normal outlets, normal channels. It'll be Highline practice, I believe the first, half hour or 45 minutes of that. Then an all skate, if you will. Qualifying Saturday. So that was practice on Friday, long practice session. But then you have qualifying Saturday, 2:15 to 3:15 Eastern in the afternoon. Then you have race 1, 5:40 to 8 on Peacock is the TV window for that. I think green flag. So, yeah, the Highline practice is 3:35 to 4:15. Race 1 is technically 6 to 8, so they'll have about a 20-minute pre-race. And then race 2, so Peacock only for Saturday. Then race 2, USA and Peacock, coverage 2:30 to 5:30.
So if racing is your bag this weekend, you'll be watching live. If college football takes precedent, which I'm guilty of, and depending on your availability, could be you as well, we may be watching in a delay.
I'll be watching them live.
Sunday's easier than Saturday for me.
Yeah. Saturday, I will be kind of bouncing back and forth.
I got to watch Notre Dame lose at Texas A&M on Saturday.
They
got Miami
who do you
and
think
Florida.
wins? Yeah, there are a lot of good games. Who do you think wins race 1 and race 2? And I guess you don't even have to get them in order. Just pick 2 winners.
Ooh, I'll pick 2 winners. I will go Joseph Newgarden, and I will go Pato Award to win the second one.
Literally, that's who I
really?
Yes. I'm going to do the same picks. I'm not even kidding. That's what I was thinking going in.
Newgarden and Pato.
All right. Tweets of the week time. So we have this. Lori IndyCar. No one talks about it, but the biggest IndyCar fumble of the last 5 years, by far, was announcing the Nashville finale street race on Broadway, then 4 months later canceling it and moving it to an oval in the middle of nowhere because no one bothered to confirm it was feasible.
We have not gotten the entire story on that, have we? In terms of what went down and when people knew it. Was it after the announcement they found out? Was it just miscommunication? Who knows? But it's so IndyCar.
And then the other tweet of the week from Midwestern_Ope, very popular Twitter account. The only road in Indiana that doesn't have a pothole, and it's an overhead shot of IMS.
It has been nuts. I know every summer there's a lot of construction. It just seems next level this year. I don't know if you feel that way.
I haven't really gone anywhere since July 21st, besides my house in the hospital.
Go
so
back and forth, but it's like,
I can't say.
Maybe it's it's compounded by the fact that I have construction in front of my house for the last several months and plays havoc with when it's nap time. Not only for the toddler, but for me, is working outside. But it seems next level this year. But yeah, very, very witty text out there.
Anything that we missed besides a random split?
No, I don't think so. I think it's been an interesting week and in the middle of race weekends. And this time next week, we'll be talking about a week off before the season finale at Nashville in front of dozens of IndyCar fans.
All right. Who is our random split air driver of the week?
Well, you and I are very familiar with this driver, and I think it's going to be recognizable for a lot of people, but the whole story of Mr. Tarso Marquez is very, very fascinating.
Out of him the other day.
The last couple years, we have news with him and in stock cars. So Tarso Marquez, a Brazilian race car driver, was kind of that craze that came over in the 90s or up from Brazil, and he is your favorite all-time Penske driver in 1999. As you look at
favorite all-time Penske driver in 1999, a very specific list.
Yes, his first race was Motegi. He did a partial schedule in 1999, Motegi, Long Beach, and 4 other races. His best finish was in Rio de Janeiro, a 9th place. He then raced for portions of 3 seasons for Dale Coyne Racing, 2000, 2004, and 2005. His most active season was year 2000 when he raced in 17 events, finished 25th in points, didn't race the first 3 races. His best finish was at Fontana, the season finale in 2000. He then had spot starts, 3 races in 2004, and he raced at Cleveland in 2005. His best finish all time was that 7th place at Fontana. For those that follow Formula One, you'll know him from, I guess if you remember following Minardi, 26 or 24 starts, never scored any championship points. He never completed a full year in the sport for Minardi. He retired in both of his races in 96, 97, didn't score a point. 2001, he didn't score a point, have a couple 9th place finishes. It was an underfunded team. I don't know how much you can point to Tarso Marquez as being the issue, but they were basically just chasing money in the years that Tarso Marquez drove for him. Justin Wilson, I think, replaced him at Minardi one year. Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
Or at least was in the hunt to replace him.
He was a Jaguar. I do remember that.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. So Tarso Marquez, after his ventures in kart ended in 2005, went down and raced in Brazil. Now, he resurfaced a couple years ago when he was going to be in Cup on a part-time basis with Team Stange Racing. And I remember this. He was going to race at Road America, but NASCAR would not approve him because he had 0 experience in a stock car. Like 0.
He ran stock car Brazil, though, for like a handful of years.
But he was like, he hadn't done anything in the ladder for NASCAR, anything. So he had to be approved. But so that process took him out of the running to race at Road America. So then they were going to race him at the Indy Road Course. But to be approved for that race, he had to race at Watkins Glen. So the expectations was that in 2022, they were going to show up at Watkins Glen. He was going to run at Watkins Glen. The team and Marquez did not show up for the race weekend. And this is from Wikipedia. Nothing has been heard from the team since then. They ended up not running at all in 2022.
Well, and when he was with Penske in 99, I mean, Al Unser Jr. had stuff going on behind the scenes. The Penske chassis was an absolute dog.
Disaster, yeah.
That team was a mess that year. And he tried to kind of step in and provide some relief. But, yeah, just not a good year. Then you had Gonzalo Rodriguez get killed at Laguna Seca, right as part of that team in 99. So it was not a good year.
I just think
for Penske.
Tarso Marquez, raced in inferior equipment his entire kart career and then his entire Formula One career as well. So never really know what the talent could have been for Tarso Marquez if he could have had a more competitive car in kart or Formula One. But yeah, still out there. That 2022 drama was very bizarre. But Tarso Marquez, he raced a total of, almost close to 30 races in kart/champ car. One with Penske, one season with Penske, 3 with Dale Coyne Racing. Brazilian native Tarso Marquez, this week's Random Split Era Driver of the Week.
All right, we'll be back next week to recap the Hy-Vee Milwaukee Mile 250s this weekend at the Milwaukee Mile in Wisconsin State Fair Park. Coming up next week for Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. This has been New Track Record Podcast.